press release from State House has indicated that President Bio has suspended all official overseas travel by ministers, deputies, ministers of state and heads of department effective 30th April 2023. Now, the government said the suspension is to provide heads of MDAs the opportunity to report to the public on their work as the 5 years mandate of the government comes to an end. So to discuss this more, we have in the studio the Minister of Information and Communications, Rahman Swaray, and we're expecting to have on Zoom Cyril Djengo, an economist. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, good morning. Good to be here.
Now, the decision of the President to suspend the travel of ministers, deputies, is it also attributed to the economic situation and the concerns that some members of the public have raised that the traveling as well contributes towards the economic situation in the country?
No, so it cannot be the latter for very obvious reasons. We have stated times without number that when we decide to embark on overseas travels, we'll bear in mind the cost-benefit analysis. And in all of those instances, Sierra Leone has reaped more benefits than the investment in the trips. I don't even want to call it expenditure. So that is not why. You know, His Excellency is rooting for elections. He had appointed people since April 2018 to function in various capacities. That is the team he built over the years. It's only but fair and fitting that those team members are on ground and in place to be able to give account of their stewardship to Sierra Leoneans. Remember, he had said he was going to run an accountable administration. So staying on ground and answering questions from members of the public is an act of democratic accountability. The president, remember, is making his closing arguments now for re-election, hopefully on the first ballot. He can talk about the broad vision. The granular details are for people like me and others to talk about. If I were not in town, I was probably in Saudi Arabia, in Rwanda, in China. You might not be able to get me. So it's very important. It's a mark of respect to Sierra Leoneans that His Excellency has asked us to stay on ground and continue to interact, right? The other reason is that, you know, in moments like this, I've listened, you know, some very misguided social media postings indicating that some members of government have already left the country because there is insecurity. Which better way to indicate that this country is safe, we are cohesive, we are prepared for elections, and these elections, His Excellency has assured, will be free and fair in a very stable, tranquil, and peaceful environment.
Is it
this is the way to manifest. So we're all here, all man in a ground.
Is it also
yes?
Is it also a campaign strategy to have the ministers go about and help with campaign?
Even if that were the case, what's wrong with that? We are part of the team. You know, the rest of us as ministers serve at the pleasure of His Excellency. So we want him to have another term. And I am convinced, I am so pretty confident as I sit here, having gone on thank-you tours with him across this country and on my personal behalf, I know it's going to be a Wujemete victory on the first ballot. No two ways, no ifs, no buts.
Who are the ministers expected to report to based on the President's directive now for them to stay in country and compile a report of their stewardship thus far? Are they expected to report to the President or to the people?
No, he has not said anybody must stay and compile a report. I'm merely saying this morning, last night, Samuel called me. He wanted me to appear on this program. If I were not in town, if I were in some environment, you know, Sierra Leone has a good internet system, by the way. If you go to some places, you are not able to access using any valid added service. So if I were in a place like that, you will not be able to get me. So His Excellency simply wants you and other media outlets and members of the public to be able to get Madam Memuna Pratt as and when you want her, to be able to reach out to Mr. Yelenke as and when you want him. Right. So
but
that's the point.
We've also had instances where we've been able to reach out to government officials when they're needed, even when they're out of the country. You have, you know, technological advancement. There's Zoom. There are other ways we reach out. So
did I just say I've traveled reasonably across the country? Proud to even my appointment. There are some places. If you go to a place like UAE in Dubai, where many people like to go, you have a very disrupted, value-added service, digital services there. So you might not be able to do a serious interview on Zoom, on whichever social media platform, whichever value-added platform. So for those reasons, we don't want any ifs, no buts. That is why His Excellency in His wisdom has directed through this SP that cabinet ministers, heads of MDs, are encouraged as best as possible to stay on ground.
Now, the challenge with that is there are times when, from the media perspective, you would want to get some of these leaders to an interview for clarification on something that concerns their ministry or department or agency.
Yeah.
And while they may not say they're unavailable, they would tell you they would, but it's making themselves available for that interview, for that accountability, that becomes the challenge. So as a government, what would be your line of actions going forward, especially now the president wants them to be in country so they're accessible by the people through the media to give account of their stewardship. But what happens in cases where these leaders, these heads, make themselves unavailable when invited?
Yeah, that's been the perennial problem. The fact that everybody is now staying on ground will help resolve that. His Excellency has given me renewed assurances to ensure that ministers required to face the public, whether on one-on-one or through the media, are so encouraged to do that. In coming days, you'll be hearing from me if it has to do with his re-election campaign, for example. I lead that committee together with very progressive members of our party. In coming days, you'll be hearing from me. Not everybody will be coming on air to represent the party. We will give you a direct line of contact so that we empower people to come here. But those are people we can trust to speak for and on behalf of the party in coming days. Because
and I was speaking about the government now, not the party.
But I've already spoken to that side of it. That look, for as long as they are on ground, as long as the Ministry of Information and Communications is briefed, will ensure that whoever is required for interview makes themselves available, or a competent designate will be so authorized to speak on their behalf. I mean, that's a deal.
Let me take you back quickly, Mr. Minister. So
Yes,
when you dismissed that it has nothing to do with economic reasons,
Yeah.
I mean, the decision. Under the APC, in the last term of former President Ernest Bai Koroma, he instituted about 22 austerity programs aimed at saving the current expenditure for, I think, about 309 billion at the time. No update whether anything was saved and all of that with some of these measures, and nothing was made known to the public. And this is not the first time the president is making this announcement under the SLPP. We've also seen similar announcements earlier, where even for asking MDAs not to even hold programs or conferences outside their boardrooms and all of that. And that was also aimed at helping to save the economy. So if this has nothing to do with the economy, Sierra Leoneans would want to ask, why not allow the ministers to keep doing their job?
I'll come to that. That's the second limb of my answer. Yeah, so you reference the directive, the executive order, that ministers, these were in the early days of his presidency.
Right.
I mean, first he needed to have a handle on the situation. When situation stabilized, we realized, and rightly so, that you have a private sector that also needs to survive, right? We realized that the nature of some businesses will not allow you to host it at the Ministry of Information, for example, our conference hall. Apart from the sheer size, even the ambience around it. So you have to go to hotels. I mean, this is the private sector. The hotels are owned by the private sector, the conference halls. They pay taxes, they employ Sierra Leoneans, and a lot more things. How are you going to strangulate them by not taking businesses to them? But those policies were in early days, and they were meant to ensure that we had a handle on the economy and we were able to stabilize the situation. Once that was done, we went full throttle. to hold conferences and meetings in those hotels and wherever. And on the second bit of it, you asked, what was it now?
About the economic situation.
The economic situation.
Right.
So, like I have said, this has nothing to do with the economic situation, because even in the midst of where we are, we have continued to carry out public investment programs on roads, on bridges, all across the country. We have continued to invest in free quality education. We have continued to invest in hospital and other infrastructure. We have continued to sponsor our darling Leone Stars. We've continued to fund the Premier League. We've continued to do all of the things that government since 1961 have not even done. So you cannot say that kind of
you're saying
administration is an austerity.
So
right?
you're asserting that it doesn't have an impact on the economy.
Well, if it makes the economy better, fair enough, but it is not for that reason.
Okay, so it's not intending on the economy.
However,
but we would like to find out from an economist. We have Cyril Django with us on Zoom. Good morning, Cyril. Can you hear me?
Hello, good morning. Yes, I can get you all loud and clear.
And I'm sure you must have been following the conversation, and as well you'd probably be aware of the press release by the president. What impact would this ban on the traveling of ministers, their deputies, and heads of MDAs, what impact would that travel ban have on the economy, if any at all?
Fantastic question there, if any at all. From what the minister has just said to us there, it is not about an economic impact. It is more about a political venture to get everybody within the country to go on campaigning, because if it were an economic impact, I would have thought this should have come a long time ago, wherein you are planning to save on the economy. But as the minister has himself said, it's not about the economy. They will still be funding so many of their funding programs. It is more of a political venture.
But then the minister speaks as a government minister. For you, Cyril, as an economist, from an economic point of view, does it have an impact on the economy?
Not at all, none. Because of the time frame. The time frame is very, very short. And if you're using that measure to save on foreign dollars, on foreign currencies, you would need much more time. Now, it's just between now and June. So the impact is negligible. The impact is not major enough. It is not necessarily an economic policy. It is much more of a political policy. But if it were economic, it would have happened long time ago. But let us talk about the other dimension, wherein government has basically come up with a lot of economic financial policies via the Finance Act, where we saw that as an economic tool to cushion the economy towards the election. But again, that one was essentially consisted of raising taxes on already burdened taxpayers, which for me is the economic part of government policy. But regarding the travels, no, there is not much economic impact on that. It is the Finance Act which may have some impact, and that impact could be very disastrous, because you're going to increase taxes on the already overtaxed population in this country.
We'll find time to talk about the Finance Act. Let's get back. You're saying it's more for political decision. So what political gain does this bring to the ruling system at this point?
Yes, because you had the minister say everybody should be on board. It's like, well, let me say it in Creole. The government may be saying, this not a monkey walk, babu eat. All of us should be on the ground. It is not an economic policy. It is for us to go out there and do the campaigning. That if the government had said that this measure was more about reining expenditure, that would have had a lot of political traction on the populace, because as you know, everybody is now talking about the economy. The economy is in free fall. We all know that. But since the government is so sure of itself, it has refused to clearly say This is about the economy. The economy is the number one issue confronting the people of this country. And if the argument is that it is for political reasons, for political explanations and campaigning, I think that's a very, very bad signal. It may appear to me that it is a deliberate policy to dismiss the real economic significance of curtailing traveling. You know, based on my own estimation, every year a minister can approximately spend up to $70,000 in traveling, in per diem, and conferences. Well, imagine if this policy had come up way back last year. I can tell you the impact on the economy. We cannot blame the government entirely for increase in for the rise in the dollar against the Leone. Yet its very own fiscal policy, which is import-led growth, has been the biggest anomaly, which seems to be corrected, but in a rush in these finance laws. Now, when the US raises interest rates, it is to do one thing: to reduce the number of dollars in circulation in their market and in the world. However, Sierra Leone becomes hard hit.
Just quickly, as you talk about the dollar, would this not also help in that respect? That when government officials travel, obviously their per diem would have, they're not traveling with leones, they have to travel with dollars, some. So would that not also reduce the pressure on the dollar?
But it's a very short time frame, my brother. You know, today is the 19th, and we're talking about 2 months from now. So the impact is very, 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 very negligible. It's not really a big impact. Like I said, if this had been done way back last year, it would be an economic policy. But what we have is a Finance Act, which is purported to be the economic policy, which are fully exact. But the very poor people who are meant to be salvaged, worsened by reduced dollar circulation occasioned by the Federal Reserve in the US increasing interest rates. You know why the Leone fell so rapidly? It was because over last year, the US government increased over 4%, the biggest yearly increase in interest rates ever. 4% increase in interest rates, which means a massive reduction in dollar circulation. And when we are not exporting as a means of economic development, it means we are massively short of the hard currency, the US dollars.
I'm afraid we have to hold you there, Cyril Django. Thank you very much for accepting to speak to us this morning. Cyril Django, they are a political economist, speaking to us on the decision of government to ban all travels of ministers, directors, and other state officials. Mr. Minister, you've had Cyril, and he is agreeing with you because of the time frame and how this would have no impact on the economy. So, if this is strictly a political decision, does that give your government, or should I say the ruling party, an advantage?
So I will not even say it's for political reasons. I did say from the onset that this was to deepen democratic accountability. This is showing respect for citizens, right? President Bio is enjoying a mandate given to him by the people of Sierra Leone. We are beneficiaries of his mandate. We are standing on his mandate. So, at a moment like this, when he's making his closing arguments, it's only but fair that we are all at hand to ensure that we are able to give granular details of our respective stewardships to the people of Sierra Leone as and when required, right? That is not politics. It's deepening democratic accountability. This is what governments are about, right?
So as we try to round off the conversation, what is the government doing at this point? I just quickly want to take you to the fact that the special investigative report, the part of the economy where the report speaks to that the socioeconomic standings are not solely responsible for, but they contribute to what happened in August. So what is government doing? Because there are recommendations how to deal with the economic situations.
Okay, so two things I will say as way of part in short.
Right.
Number one, I have read the report with a lot of diligence. It's clearly notes, yes, while there are issues around marginalization, economic challenges, you know, unemployment or unemployability, and, you know, the drug culture, but that was not the sole reason. That you had rogue politicians whose ultimate objective was to overthrow the democratically elected government of His Excellency Brigadier Retired Dr. Julius Maada Bio. Right? It's clearly in the report. If you are a lazy reader, I advise you to read the executive summary of the report. These are not my words. These are the words of the commission. Yeah, the Special Investigation Committee set up. So having said that, we also note that in the course of his period, when His Excellency received that report, he noted, yes, there are global headwinds occasioned by the twin shocks of COVID, of the Russia-Ukraine war. However, even in the midst of that, when COVID broke, we had started doing very well as a country. We inherited a difficult situation, a very challenging situation, right? But we had started weathering the storm already. We had started weathering the storm. Once COVID broke, we put in place a quick action economic response program by which we gave $50 million to commercial banks to support importers so that we cannot have a shortage of essential commodities. Little wonder during all of those difficult periods, you know, while we saw long queues on social media, queuing up for basic essential commodities, Sierra Leone did not go down that path. Neighboring countries like Liberia, Guinea, and all of them came here to buy essential commodities. That was not a walk in the park. It was clearly thought through, right? Number two, His Excellency noted that his government continues to give palliatives, direct cash transfers to people living with disabilities when we locked down. It was during the same period that we commissioned the Munafa Fund. It was during the same period that we paid wages for people working in the service sector, hotel and tourism employees, for 3 months. So we did a lot of things. It was during the same period that we have had to do upward review of salaries for various people and did employment. This did not happen in many countries. So yes, we agree there are economic challenges, but there are also economic challenges in other parts of the country, the report noted. Why didn't they also go out swinging and asking for President Bio's head? Right? So these are the issues we are talking about. We also note that you had a whole generation of young people who had missed out on education, on schooling, so that they can have a legitimate source of livelihood. These guys are now grown up. They want to start families. They want a good life. That is why government is investing in technical and vocational education and training. We have them up and running in about 10 districts right now as I speak. And we have had the Skills Development Fund doled out to these institutions so that those young men who missed out on technical vocational education and training could also catch up and get secure and sustainable livelihoods to look after themselves and their families and not see crime as a way out.
And just as we wrap up, before we let you go, Safa was saying here that their work is done. They've done the presentation to the president. Is there a word you would share with the people right now on what the government intends to do with the report?
Well, His Excellency's repeater station, I was there when he received this report, and he did say actionable parts of the report will be actioned. And he warned that while we expect individuals to express their views on policy issues, freely express their opinions, as in a democracy, there are also responsibilities. He did say anybody who has had a hand in to torpedo the peace and stability of this country, be it in the killing of, in the cold-blooded murder of a police officer, or participation in the August 8 to 10 demonstrations, will have their day in court.
An attempted overthrow comes with serious legal implications. Is this issue expected to stand trial?
Well, the president did promise action on actionable bits of the recommendations. So that's probably something you might need to talk to the AG about.
Thank you very much for your time to talk to us this morning.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.